Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to be continuing the exhaust build for the Mark 4 GTI. We're going to be working on getting the next section complete. I'm just starting it now, so we're going to be turning this old rusty pipe into nice new shiny stainless with all of these pieces. So we're going to be transitioning from round pie cuts, use that transition into oval, and then we'll be continuing with more oval pie cuts. So pie cuts mean a whole lot of test fitting, and they also mean a whole lot of welding. So let's get into it. So I started out with tacking together some of the round pie cuts to start making the first bend. When I'm doing pie cuts or tacking anything really, I like to try and do at least 3 tacks, but ideally 4 tacks. It all depends on how well stuff fits up on whether or not I can get that many tacks. Obviously, Stainless Bros makes these pre-made. They're really clean, so they have great fit up straight out of the packaging. You don't have to clean them whatsoever, really. So I can get 4 tacks on these, but once I get the tacks complete, what you'll see me do next when I go to put the next piece on is these pie cuts have a seam on the inside of them from how the tubing is manufactured. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to find where that seam is and line it up to the other pie cuts that I've already welded. That way that I know I have them in the same orientation all the way around, so I know I'm getting basically the maximum amount of angle out of each pie cut that I can. So these pie cuts are 9 degrees apiece, so I'm trying to line it up and get all of that 9 degrees every single time instead of like them being slightly rotated and then only getting 7 or 8 degrees out of each of them and having to end up using more possibly. So I'm gonna continue tacking some up, but we're gonna make this go a little bit quicker. That way you guys don't have to watch me just keep stacking these up. So here's a little hack that I'm doing with my phone. So I'm holding the flange flat against my workbench, then I'm zeroing out my phone, and then I'm putting it on top of the tubing. That gives me the angle that this tube is running at. So from there, I can just do some math and figure out that the bend here is roughly 70 degrees. So it gives me an idea of how many pies that I need to weld together before I can start test fitting. Got this section all welded together, so this is the first bend. You can see I had a couple little issues here with fit up. There were some gaps that I had to deal with, and when you're trying to tack with no filler, it's hard to manage gaps, but oh well, we got it done. So now we're going to move on to attaching this to the rest of the exhaust. So first, I've got to weld a V-band onto the straight section that is going to come off of the mid pipe. So I did all this off camera, figured I didn't need to walk you guys through how to clean up pipe yet again. So we're gonna weld that V-band on, and then after that we're gonna test fit this all back in the car, tape it together at whatever angle it needs to be at, and then tack that and make it one pipe. And then that'll be the last of the round section of this. got the V-band all welded up, so it's I just went ahead and threw it in the car and then started test fitting stuff together. So as you can see, if you're trying to do this at home, painter's tape will be your best friend. So what I've done is I've welded the V-band onto the straight section, and then I've just taped the bend relatively close to where I want it to be, just to try it. And then I've taped the oval to round transition on to the end of that as well. So now we need to start working with oval piping. So I've actually already tacked together some oval bends, or oval pie cuts really, to create a bend for going around that right corner around the heat shield. It's really a left turn, but it's on the right hand side of the screen. So now I need to cut some oval tubing to make up the difference, and we'll get started working on making this go over the rear axle. This was kind of a dumb idea that I noticed when I was getting out from underneath the car, but I could totally just scrap all of my ideas and do a side exit oval exhaust. I really like oval exhausts or side exit exhausts just because it makes me think of like DTM cars from the 90s, where they used to have side exits like coming out of this section of their quarter ahead of the wheel. But let me know what you would think in the comments if I actually went forward with doing this and just made a quarter panel dump, basically. All right, back to actually doing work though. We got our first oval bend done, so we can start going over top of the axle now. So the pipe that I showed when I was underneath the car, this will butt up to the end of that oval to round transition. So this will curve to straighten out the exhaust again. What we're gonna have to do, and I don't have them out yet, is right against this, I think we're gonna have to immediately start bending upwards to get up and over top of the rear axle. So I'm gonna wait for this to cool down a little bit. It's not super hot, but tacks make it a little warm. And then I'm gonna use more painter's tape, tape this to the oval to round transition, and then see, I'm probably gonna tape together a few pie cuts and see if I can have enough room to just start bending straight up, or if I need like a 1 inch or 2 inch section of just straight pipe to get past some of the heat shielding. So pretty happy with how the progress is coming so far. I realize at this point I've skipped around a decent bit, but I've done enough test fitting that I'm confident in my positioning. So what I did is I went ahead and I tacked my round pie cut bend to the round straight section. So this is now permanently together. And what I do, a lot of people like to tack things together in the car, which is definitely 100% better than what I do, but I don't have the space underneath the car, as you guys have seen, to be able to do that, nor do I want to move my welder around that much. So what I do is I just make Sharpie marks and line them back up, which isn't perfect, but it's the best that I can do. So that's my method for lining up bends after I take them back out of the car. Obviously, like, I still mark them when they're painter's taped together, so it's as similar as being in the car as I can get it to be. And then I went ahead and also tacked the oval stuff onto the oval to round transition. So the only adjustability that I have left is here. So I can rotate however I'd like from there, but
I've done enough test fitting that I'm confident in these two pieces being the way that they need to be. Now what I'm going to do is tape these together where I think they need to be taped. You can see I've Sharpie marked right there. So I'll tape them back together how they were before. And then I'm going to start bending up and over the rear axle. So my method to how I do this is I make, well, the reason I do it this way is because I know I'm going from one flat section to another flat section. So I make two pie cut bends that are the same amount of pie cuts so that I can go from flat in one direction to flat in another direction. So essentially, if you can imagine a straight section of pipe being through here, I'm trying to do that with, you know, extra distance tacked onto it. So now I'm going to tape one of these to here, tape that back together, and go underneath the car and try and measure the distance of straight tube that I need between both of these. So we're going to take you guys and show you how I fit up tube.
So I got our bends taped together here. So one thing that I found when I put this back underneath the car is some of the stuff kind of moved a little bit when I welded it. So what ended up happening is I actually needed like a 1/2 inch piece of straight tubing to go between this bend and before I started bending up, because I was starting to hit this heat shield. So I cut that and I've taped it in for now just to see how it goes. But this is basically my method of how I fit tubing up. And what you'll notice as well is I've actually taped another pie cut onto the top of this. So I thought 4 was enough. I think 5 might actually do the trick. I'm trying to tuck this up as early as possible because the rear beam design on these cars, they swing. Obviously, like it pivots around a fixed point ahead of it. It's one solid axle technically. And so it travels in an arc rather than straight up and down. So I'm trying to account for if this swings forward a little bit. And also, the way that I have my car lowered is I'm running ECS centering plates, which go underneath the axle mounts, which I don't even think you guys can see. You might see a little corner of it up here. But what that does is it basically shifts the entire axle back about 1/2 inch as well. And in the future, I'm going to be getting rid of those and putting IDF drop plates on. So I also want to account for this moving a 1/2 inch forward because I don't want to have to cut my exhaust and re-weld it just because I changed something on the rear suspension. So this is the other set of bends, and I've taped on another pie cut to that to make it match this one. And I just kind of hold them up, kind of eyeball that they're, you know, on the same plane or at least following the same path as best as possible. And then it's just as easy as put a tape measure in there. And I'm holding this like right against the heat shield as high up as I can. And I'm at about 2.5 inches. So I'm gonna cut a tube pretty much right at 2.5. I always cut my tubing a little long, that way I can shave it down if it doesn't fit how I expect it to. So I'm going to cut that and then try fitting this up again and see how well it fits, and then from there I'll decide on if I need all 5 of these pie cuts in this bend, and if I do and like the way that that looks, I'll tack that in, and I'll tack the straight section in as well, so that, you know, I've fixed this entire portion of the exhaust. So after measuring up that tube, I welded the vertical pie cuts onto the end of the exhaust where I was convinced they needed to go, and then I cut this 2.5 inch straight section, taped it to the other pie cuts, and now we're going to see how well it fits. So this is what I do to double check that my pipes fit. Just hold them together.
Obviously it's not perfect because stuff welds once you, or stuff moves once you weld it, but this will give me an idea if I'm close to my target. So you can see that it fits onto the end of the bend, and then that is the amount of clearance we have to the heat shield. So it's about a finger, which is pretty much what I'm trying to keep the whole way around while doing this. Yeah, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this section back off and the rest of the pipe, and I'm going to tack that straight section on and probably tack the pies to it as well, and then come back and double check that this all fits the same way as what it did while I'm holding it. So let's get to it.
Here I'm trying to get comfortable with how I'm positioning the tube to be able to weld it. So it's my belief that about 50 to 70% of welding isn't even skill, it's about being comfortable with what you're doing. So you can see that like I'm flipping this pipe around and trying to find orientation where I'm comfortable with holding the tube and also having my right hand free to be able to tack with the TIG torch. So it's not the easiest thing to do. It takes a little bit of finesse work, and you know, the more that you weld, the more you get comfortable in uncomfortable situations. So you know, there is a certain aspect of this that, you know, you got to just suck it up and say, I'm gonna try it. And you know, part of this, as you'll see in some of the clips, is I do one of these tacks left-handed, which I can't weld left-handed at all, but I didn't have a choice, and I just went for it and hoped for the best. You know, the worst thing that can happen is you blow through a section of tube and you have to retry, but you kind of just got to go for it. And like I said, you'll get more comfortable in uncomfortable situations the more you try them, but you got to put yourself out there and at least have that attempt.
There we go, we got it in the car. Fits perfectly. See, I got clearance above it. So now we need to transition to straight oval tubing to get past the rear beam here. I'm going to cut it a hair short, just in case. It measures to about 6 inches. I'm really going to cut it like 5.5. And then we're going to test fit that up. And then I need to start figuring out what to do to get that outlet into the right spot for the muffler that's going to end up somewhere in this space. So, got to start pre-planning bends and things of that nature to get to the right spot. So, all right, I did a whole lot of test fitting, like an hour's worth of test fitting basically, and I think this is what I need for the rest of the section of this. So got about 5 inches of straight oval, a couple pie cuts, and then this is the oval to round transition, and then these are a couple of round pie cuts to get us back going straight and getting us ready to go into the muffler. So I'm going to tack each piece of this one piece at a time and test fit every portion in between, which is going to be a agonizing process, but I'd rather do it that way than go, yep, let's burn this all in, and find out that I screwed up. So all of this is to try and line up with the muffler in at least space where the muffler would fit. So it's a bit of a guessing game, and I don't have enough arms to hold everything underneath the car, so it's a whole lot of taping and then hold something up and then rinse and repeat. So I'm getting really tired of holding stuff up underneath this car. So we're going to burn a couple pieces of these in, test fit, and see if I'm still on the right track or if I need to scrap what I'm doing and try a different path. All right, everything's tacked together. So this is where I'm going to end this one. I think it's gone on long enough. This is definitely the most intricate portion of exhaust on Mark IVs. So everything is tacked together the whole way. So this will be off the mid pipe all the way down, and then I have not tacked that on yet. So I'm not fully convinced that that is where the V-band needs to go, so I don't want to commit to welding that on. I think I'm going to do a little bit of work on the muffler section before I commit to doing that. But it gave me an idea of where I could potentially stop, so I just left it alone. But as of right now, there are 30 joints on this exhaust that need to be fully welded. So if we assume that they're all 3-inch round, which they're really not, and you do the math on that, you know, it's 3 inches times pi, which we'll call it 3 times 3. So that's 9 times 30 is 270 inches worth of weld, give or take, probably closer to 300 with when you factor in rounding. So I am not going to record all that. I'm not going to put you guys through watching all that. So I'm going to weld this in my free time, basically, and it might take me a while before I get another video out because of that, but it's taking me long enough to get this video done. So with that, thank you for watching. If you made it this far, thank you for subscribing, and next time we'll do the muffler section of this, and then we can say it's done. Now, I got 2 weeks-ish, 2.5 weeks until I need to have this done, so we better get cooking. All right, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. See you guys later.